lot of controversy regarding ethics. I find it very interesting when these two combine the science and the ethical side of things. So Dolly was a female sheep, and she was the first mammal cloned from an adult cell. Cloning is the process of generating a genetically identical copy of a cell or an organism. This was a really big breakthrough, but people started questioning it morally. So first I'm going to talk about Dolly and how she was created, the purposes and why people would want to clone things, and the moral issues it presents. Before Dolly was born, it was believed that human cloning was very far in the future, but the process of nuclear transfer made this possible. This is when the nucleus from one unfertilized egg is replaced with the nucleus of an early embryonic cell, so something just very early and undeveloped. And this had been achieved at this level, but never with an adult cell. It was thought that once the cells were more developed, they could no longer be messed with or changed. So Keith Campbell and Ian Wilmot are the scientists behind Dolly. And this process was very inefficient. According to David Salter in the article Mammalian Cloning published by Nature Publishing Group, once nuclear transfer is completed, only 1 in 100 of the cells will be able to survive into a healthy adult. For Dolly, 277 embryos were used, and she was the only one that was born alive and grew into a healthy adult. The scientist behind the project, Ian Wilmot, said in the article Dolly and Me published by New Scientist that Dolly changed the fundamental way we understand developmental biology, but her arrival didn't neatly splice the world. So she attracted a lot of attention. There were a lot of news articles that came out, but it also posed a lot of questions, and people began to wonder what the purposes of this were. So the purposes include medical use, creating new animals, and combating infertility. So to begin with medical, cloning can be used to create new organs or tissues. If someone needed an organ transplant, they could clone the organ that they needed and create the perfect one. As shared by Alan Trunson in the article published by CSIRO titled The Potential Benefits of Cell Cloning, the benefits of treatments and therapies in humans in their medical fields are considerable, and the legislation to ban these procedures blocks this progress. So along with that, cloning can be used to create more animals. So these are Dolly's sisters that they created. You could create livestock, and you could also make sure the animal is engineered perfectly for what we need it for. If a species was to go extinct, we could repopulate the species, or if a species was on the brink of extinction, we could again repopulate it. People even talked about the idea of if your pet dies, you could have your pet for longer. As far as infertility, as shared in the article Cloning, Genetic Relatedness, and Parenthood by Robert Sparrow, arguments for cloning as a reproductive technology rely on cases where people cannot have children by any other means but desire to have a children they are genetically related to, so the child would have genes from both of their parents. And that kind of sets it aside from adoption and other ways to go about that. And in these ways, the publicity around Dolly turned into the talk around human cloning, and there was a lot of backlash. So, as stated in the article, Cloning Spawns Ethical Debate by David Kustenbaum, published by AAAS, President Clinton had already assembled a commission to advise him on human cloning, and within days after the birth of Dolly, he banned this research and banned the funding of any research related to human cloning. Multiple bills were proposed to make it unlawful to use a human embryo with the intent of cloning it. Stated in the article, The Case Against Cloning, published by New Atlantis, they believe that if a scientist is researching this, they believe that it's morally acceptable to destroy human embryos. And people jump to these conclusions because the intents around it are very cloudy. Creating a human clone would be a chance for people to re-engineer our species, and you could create a human however you wanted to. It would destroy the notion that every human being is an individual because someone would be what they were cloned to be, not necessarily an individual. Along with that, cloning is very inefficient, and many embryos die in the process. So here you can see the light gray line, the tall ones is the embryos created, and not the middle darker gray one at the very bottom, you can barely see it, are the ones that are able to survive, and these are just animal examples. And that just proves how inefficient it is and why people would not want to experiment with that in humans. Along with that, a cloned being is substantially more prone to disability and disease. In the book Human Cloning, written by Barbara McKinnon and published by University of Illinois Press, the ideas are shared that one could potentially clone someone we don't necessarily want. Here, she used the example of Hitler. And you could also create an army of drones to do work for you, which is a really weird concept. And she compares the technology to that used in the movie Frankenstein. So in this chart, you can see that in 2001, 88% of people were against human cloning and 63% were against animal cloning. In 2016, those numbers decreased, but they're still substantially against it. This technology is very groundbreaking and interesting, but it also proves how many things we still don't know about science and opens the door to a lot of ethical debate. So today I will leave you with the question of whether or not you think that cloning should be something allowed to be researched and looked into. Thank you.